Yo, what's up, family? So, in the book of Peter, 2 Peter chapter 3, family, I wanted to talk to you. Why are the false teachers compared to wells without water? I wanted to get on that subject with you guys because there is a lot of folks walking around that are wells without water, family. This doesn't just apply to Peter's time, but also to today's time. You know, the other day, I'm not going to call out who these people are, but there are three men of God. They have this podcast, or I thought they were men of God. When you start to listen to some people talk, you know, you realize real quick, wait a minute, you got that wrong. You know, wait a minute. And they just keep talking and it just gets worse and worse. Well, these people were speaking about the end times. They were speaking about what's going on, what we're seeing today. And then they started talking about the book of Revelation and just had it all wrong, bro. I was just, you know, I almost get this righteous anger in me when people claim to know God, claim to be of God, but yet are so out there, do not comprehend, do not, and you will think for a minute, these are smart people, like, and even their dad, like, who passed away recently was, you know, in my eyes was a man of God. So I don't know where these three went wrong. I'm not sure what happened there, but just the podcast alone was enough to show me, okay, well, I'm going to pray for them and hope that the longer they go into the book of Revelation, that the Lord's going to reveal to them the real truth and not their truth, not their image of God that they're setting up. I mean, they don't believe that we're living in the last days. You know, they don't believe that Jesus is God. I mean, just a lot of things. They just can't see in the Bible where all this, you know, and it's like, well, you know, maybe you need to study a little more. And then one of them went as far as saying they didn't know what the second death was. It's like, guys, if you don't know these things, the way you find it is in the Word. You know, you find it in the Word. You don't find it through, especially through people like this. So, yeah, needless to say, I was a little disappointed, but there's so many others just like them out there that have blood on their hands, family, that are leading people astray. I fear the Lord Almighty. I am not out here trying to lead people astray. I don't make a dime off YouTube. I don't put ads in my videos. I mean, you know, right now, I've got y'all staring at some scripture. You know, I keep it simple because that's the way it needs to be. But false teachers have insinuated, you know, they've basically put themselves into the Christian church since the beginning. You know, they are dangerously deceptive operators with smooth speech and seductive ways. New believers, family, the babies, man, I worry about them, are particularly susceptible to their methods because they don't know the truth yet. They're on the milk. So ever the passionately protective shepherd, the Apostle Peter dedicates the entire chapter to exposing these religious pretenders, you know. So if you look into 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 17, okay, we can see what it says. He compares them to wells without water, clouds carried by a tempest, for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever, family. So Peter wants his flock to understand how false teachers operate, learn to spot them, and to avoid falling victim to their heresies. My brother Scott did a wonderful video, you know, speaking on this too. You know, family, take the time. I'll try to, I did share it in the community, but I'll try to put it in the description box too and share that. But he did a wonderful study on this. But his metaphors liken them to wells without water and clouds carried by tempests are similar to the portion, if you look into Jude's description of false teachers. They are clouds without water carried by the wind, late autumn trees without fruit, dead, twice dead. Yeah. Pulled up by the roots, you know, raging waves of sea foaming up their own shame, wandering stars for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. And that's in Jude chapter 1, family. The word of Peter uses the well actually means a flowing spring. So in the original Greek, that's what it means. When Jesus ministers to the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4, he uses the same term to describe the soul satisfying living water, the thirst that only he can supply. A thirsty first century traveler would immediately understand the disappointment of coming upon a well that promises water but does not deliver, right? So instead of fresh, thirst-quenching, life-giving fountains, wells without water are hollow. They are useless, producing nothing but dust and mud and unquenchable thirst, like a dried-up spring. False teachers promise much but have zero to offer. And they are everywhere. They are everywhere today. There's nothing new under the sun. I've got a couple of them that watch me. I mean, and hi, still praying for you, darling. You know, I mean, they preach freedom but supply bondage. You know, they don't teach the gospel of the truth of Jesus. You know, they don't do that. They go around it. They guarantee pleasure but furnish anguish. They promise life but deliver death. False teachers deny the gospel, distort it through human error. 2 Peter 2:3, Colossians 2:8, 1 Timothy 6:20 through 21. Or even demonic inspiration, as 1 Timothy 4 tells us, or Corinthians 11. Or 1 John chapter 4, 1 through 3. So like Peter, the Apostle Paul devotes much energy to exposing these false teachers. Okay, skipping the metaphor of wells without water, Paul states plainly, let no one deceive you with empty words, family, because for such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. That's right. Paul said that. So Paul teaches Timothy that false teachers depart from the truth and turn to meaninglessly talk. You know, stuff that don't matter, don't make no sense, and ain't saving nobody. They want to teachers of the law, but they do not know that they are talking. They don't know what they're talking about, and they do it confidently, family. And this is in Timothy 1, 6 through 7, and also Titus 1, 10 through 11. So he advises the Colossians, and you can see this, that no one take you captive through hollow or deceptive words, family, which depend on like human traditions and spiritual forces of the world rather than on Christ. And that's in the book of Colossians chapter 2. Peter explains that false teachers secretly, introduce destructive heresies, even denying the sovereign Lord who brought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. They don't, and half of them don't even realize it, and some of them do. 2 Peter 2:1. So false teachers come disguised as harmless sheep, but are raven, vicious wolves. And Jesus, the Lord, our Father, our God, it warns us in Matthew 7:15. And Paul affirms, I know that false teachers are like vicious wolves will come in among you after I leave, not sparing the flock. Even so, men from your own group will rise up and distort the truth in order to draw a following. That's all they care about, is the numbers, the likes, the following, the money, the ads. Read it in Acts 20, verses 29 through 30. Comparing false teachers to wells of water is Peter's figurative way of saying that the message of false teachers is meaningless, useless. It has no value. Like the rebellious people, think about Jeremiah all the time. Think about the false teachers that were in his day. There is nothing new under the sun. If anything, it's more worse today than it was then. But yeah, they are wells without water. And the spring of living water, and have dug their own. It talks about this in Jeremiah chapter 2. I believe it was chapter 2. It talks about it. Because they reject the teaching of the wise, which is a fountain of life, they fall into snares of death. The book of Proverbs 13:14 tells us that, and Proverbs 14:27. So false teachers bring on false converts. So we got a lot of these people walking around today, and they are lost, and they need to know the truth. We have to help them, and they may not receive it. They may reject it. Knock the dust off your feet and carry on, but do not hold in the truth of God just because you don't want to offend somebody. The truth will offend at times, family. But false teachers hold out a promise of satisfaction for thirsty souls, but ultimately leave those people parched and in need of the living water, which they're not receiving. That's why they're never satisfied. And that a lot of their so-called stuff they use and do don't never come to pass. So there's an empty hope. Their teachings are hollow and void of the real truth of God. So like wells without water, they appear to offer life, but they deliver only bondage, destruction, and death. And you remain thirsty.